Guys, welcome to Daily Premier League Transfer News Live with me, Barnaby Slater. As the Spurs players enjoy their first days off in months, the knives seem to be sharpening for Ange Postecoglou as ex-Spurs players, managers and journalists all pen articles and give interviews about what is going wrong at the club. Meanwhile, reports that the love affair between Tottenham Hotspur and Son Heung-Min may be coming to an end, and who will be the next Spurs manager whenever that may happen. Apparently, Don Fabio Paratici is whispering in Daniel Levy's ear about trusting the club to another Italian Scudetto winner. All this and more in today's live episode. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you're on YouTube, please do give this video a like. And if you're not already a subscriber to my channel, about 700 away from 15,000 now. So please do press that subscription button. And also you can listen to this on the audio platforms, be that Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Just go over there, type in the Spurred On podcast and give me a subscribe or a follow there. Really appreciate all of your support. But let's get going. Nick in Hong Kong in the comments already. Thank you, mate. Says, good day, Barnaby. Soothe our weary brows. It is a very difficult time to be a Spurs fan at the moment, isn't it? We're only on Tuesday. We've got a game again on Sunday, but it just feels like just desperate to have a game where we win and get a good win and a good performance, get some confidence into those players, get some confidence into the fan base. I've listened this morning to the View from the Lane podcast. Sorry, no, not the View from the Lane. Sorry, the Tottenham Way podcast, which is with the journalists from the Evening Standard and one from the Sun. I listened to that whilst I was on my run this morning, and it was pretty downbeat, but I have to say they did touch on all of the questions that I have been asking. It's definitely worth a listen. Do give it a listen, the Tottenham Way podcast, because they talk a lot about, obviously, Ange's impassioned defence of his players after the game and whether they felt that was really a defence of the players or really a defence of himself. And it was very nuanced, and I enjoyed that. And then they also did raise all the questions I've been asking, which is, why are the injuries happening? Why has it been 2 seasons of injuries? We're not just talking about 1 season of injury. And they talk about all of that. So I definitely recommend it. And some of the journalists on there saying, which I kind of agree with, I do feel strongly that Ange Postecoglou can be the right man in the long term for Tottenham Hotspur. But they questioned this, and it's a really good question. Is he the right man for this crisis where, you know, his stubbornness and his refusal to kind of change that much very often? I mean, you can maybe say the Brentford game and the Liverpool game, he did try potentially to get more defensive, although I've asked the question before and I'll ask it again. Was that his decision, or was that the players doing that kind of without him asking or not? So, but them suggesting, is he the right man in the short term when we're 14th in the league? We're on a downward spiral out of both domestic cups. So yeah, I do give that a recommend. RJ67 in the comments says, when will Ange get the sack? Well, from everything I'm hearing at the moment, he's definitely getting that Manchester United game. My instinct, as I said on the live show yesterday, is that he will probably get the Europa League now. I think he'll probably get the Europa League, and maybe by the time the Europa League's done, the next round is in March. Really, you're only looking at a couple more months till the end of the season. And unless we get dragged down into a relegation scrap, which I have to say is unlikely because all the other teams below us are so bad, even though we've lost to a number of them, then I think he'll get the season. But you have to think strongly that they are succession planning now. That is for sure. Not to say that he'll definitely get the sack, because, of course, if he wins the Europa League, then this turns out to be, you know, one of the great seasons in our history. And almost like the season that all the Spurs fans have asked for so long, where like, we don't care about trying to get top 4. We just want to win a cup. And if we were to win the Europa League, then that would answer all of our prayers, wouldn't it? So my instinct, RJ67, thanks for your comment, is that Ange will get the Europa League now. Although I do think one humiliating defeat, like if we were to get absolutely pumped by Man United or somebody else, then maybe that could be the end. But I don't know. I do not know. Connor, thanks for your comment. He says, all right, Barnaby, I might not be in the chat much due to work, but just know I'm listening. I'm live. Pancaj says, finally got you on live. Love your videos and commentary. Appreciate that. RJ67 says, hashtag Ange out. So there is that split in the Spurs fan base at the moment. Those who are extra and super supportive of Ange, and those who definitely want him out. Samuel in the comments says Heung-Min Son should have never joined that dusty football club, Tottenham Hotspur. Son would have won loads of trophies at Manchester United. Okay, well, that brings me on nicely to some of the reports today that Spurs are now apparently considering the departure of Son Heung-Min in the summer. Reports say that there is an openness to him leaving, even though the 32-year-old has been such a loyal servant in North London. For me, it's a difficult one with Sonny. He's undoubtedly not having his best season. I think he still scored like 10 goals all competitions and maybe 6 or so assists, which a lot of players would be pretty happy with starting out wide left. But he's almost like a slave to his own brilliance in previous years. He's only 32. He's not like 36. And a lot of players who are as committed to football as Son is are now playing long into their late 30s. And for me, I think, although a lot of people are like, oh, Son's spent, his legs are gone. I don't agree. I just think he's played too much football. And what he needs is a rest. And, bear in mind with Sonny, of course, also, he flies so much to go and play for South Korea as well. So he needs a rest. We need these players that we're bringing in and to continue to bring in to be players who can take minutes away from Son. And then again, it comes up to that big question of, is Ange Postecoglou the right manager to get enough players playing regularly enough to allow players like Son to have a rest? So I'm not quite as simple as saying, oh, Sonny's not had a good season, so he should leave. Listen, what I would say, though, I love Sonny, and he's been an unbelievable servant to this football club and a brilliant, brilliant player, one of our club legends. And if it ever gets to the point where Son Heung-Min says, I want to leave the club, then I think fair enough, we say, absolutely right. We obviously took up his option for the extra year. So we would be potentially able to get a transfer fee for him in the summer. But I would think if a big club came into for him, say a Barcelona, and I'm just saying Barcelona because obviously they take punts on players who are a bit older. Obviously Lewandowski's done so well for them, but maybe Saudi Arabia or the MLS, then we'd want to get maybe £5 to £10 million for him, I think, realistically, and that is money that Spurs could reinvest. But I think it would be better for Tottenham if we keep Sonny in the summer and then we just try to find ways to not have him playing as many minutes next season. That is my preference. Let me know in the comments what you think. He's been brilliant for Sonny, and like I said, I think the key part with him is whatever he wants to do, then he should be allowed to make that decision for himself. On 34 likes already, guys, and 200 people watching concurrently, thank you so much. Let's press that like button. If you haven't pressed the like button so much, the more likes we get, the more Spurs fans we can get these daily live shows seen by. Brandon de Jong says in the comments, give Ange the remainder of his contract to see what he can produce with a few more signings and a full squad. Well, his contract, I think, is 4 years, isn't it? So it'll be 2 years come this summer. Listen, I'm not totally against that, but not to sound like a broken record. The thing for me with Ange is he has to find, if he gets next season, he has to find a way to be more like Arne Slot at Liverpool, by which I mean getting players on the pitch, less injuries. So they said on the Tottenham Way podcast this morning, they were like, the problem with Spurs are just having the same season that Newcastle had last year. Newcastle were in the Champions League last year and they couldn't deal with the 2 games a week minimum. And that's true to a degree, but Newcastle were never as bad as 14th in the league for a starter. And secondly, this isn't just this season. Like I mentioned earlier, Ange had only 1 game a week last season because of no Europe. And we still got loads of injuries. And Ange was blaming the lack of form and the injuries on the fact that the players weren't playing enough. So as far as I'm concerned, you can't have it both ways. So Ange needs to come up with a definite way, if he's going to stay at this club next season, of making sure he gets players on the pitch every single week so that he can rest those players who need rest, so that he can bring in the young players in less of a pressured situation, and so that we can, get back to the form we had in the first 10 games of last season. Samuel, I've read Samuel's already. Matt Richardson says we might as well stick with him now. RJ67, thank you for your comments. I think if we lose to Man United, then Levy will pull the trigger. I kind of feel a bit like if he hasn't pulled the trigger after last week, then why would he pull the trigger after losing to Manchester United? I have to say, as much as everybody will be looking at it as like, oh, Manchester United, good opportunity to win easily because they're in such bad form, they do play better against teams who come at them. They really struggle at home against the teams who play in low blocks. Sound familiar, guys? As do Spurs. And actually in that League Cup game against Manchester United at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, I thought despite it being relatively early in Amorim's reign, you could see the kind of patterns that they were trying to play. So it would not surprise me if United had one of their better games against Spurs. It really wouldn't. Chris Bailey, thank you for your comment. He says this. Hi, Barnaby. What are your thoughts on Ange taking a look at Archie Gray playing in midfield? So I like Archie Gray at centre-back, and that's because having seen him play at centre-back, obviously a lot in the Premier League and in the Cups this season, but also way back in the pre-season, I really think it suits Archie Gray when he's got the whole pitch in front of him and he can see everything in front of him. On the few occasions that I've seen him in central midfield so far, he hasn't looked quite so comfortable when he's had his when he's facing his own goal and he's taking the ball from his back four or from the goalkeeper, where you want players to be able to take it on the half turn. And listen, he's 18 years old, and so I don't expect him to be Luka Modric yet. Of course, that will come with experience and confidence. But I just think for now, and in the crisis period we're in, to play him in that number 6 role or the number 8, where he's got to take the ball on the half turn and have players pressing him from behind and putting him under loads of pressure, I think that is a lot of pressure to put him under. And so it hasn't massively surprised me that big Ange Postecoglou hasn't given him that much of a chance in central midfield yet, but also, of course, because we literally don't have any centre-backs. Ben Davies obviously didn't play at the weekend. I wonder if that was down to a little soreness or a little niggle. You've got Danso has come in now, but Gray has had to play alongside Danso because of Dragusin's injury and Romero's injury and Van de Ven's injury. So for now, I don't think we'll be seeing Gray in midfield anytime soon, but I could, of course, be wrong. John Zygan says we won't win the Europa League with Ange. Okay, well, that's your opinion. You're probably right, I would say, but imagine if we could just do something with this season. I just am desperate for it to get to March and us have our squad back and in a bit of form, and then just to go deep into that competition. I keep saying it. I want it to work for Ange, and I'm desperate for us to win something and go deep in the Europa League. Because if we did win the Europa League, we get in the Champions League, and this whole season, the negativity of this winter, we could just completely forget about it. FFFSS in the comments says, hope everybody will be at the game the weekend will be at the Levy Out protest. Okay, so obviously I do watch-alongs during the games on Chris Cowlin's channel, so I won't be there, but it will be interesting to see whether this protest, which does seem to have got a bit more traction on social media, whether it will be bigger than a lot of the previous protests I've seen, which have tended to be a maximum maybe a couple of hundred people and one banner, and it's all been a little bit embarrassing. There does seem to be a bit more traction from the mainstream media picking it up, the sports journalists, and some bigger accounts on social media picking it up and wanting to do it. I think personally, one of the issues you're going to have when it comes to hoping that those protests get much, much bigger is that I think the older generation, so people of kind of my age who've been maybe supporting Spurs since the late 80s and sat through the 90s and the early noughties and how terrible it was then, I'm afraid that I think a lot of us are a bit more patient and are willing to understand that Spurs are trying to be run sustainably and trying to get success the right way, and obviously don't have an oligarch or an oil state funding it, are not trying to cook the books in the way that Chelsea even have done since Abramovich has gone, as well as when Abramovich was there. And obviously are not a club who are trying to take the Premier League to court over and over again, like Manchester City have done, which, as far as I'm aware, the first club in the history of British football to take the the powers that be to court and blame them for for not getting everything they want. So that is the problem, that I think a lot of the people who are season ticket holders are older fans, and they remember the 90s through Christian Gross, through Jerry Francis, Alan Sugar back in the late 80s, Irving Scholar, when the club nearly went out of business, and they realized that the club is bigger now. We are, despite the fact we're in 14th place in the league, we are one of the top 6 clubs in the country. We have one of the biggest stadiums. We have the training ground. Now, I know that, playing devil's advocate, that is also one of the reasons why we should be more successful on the pitch. And of course it should be. However, there is also, I'm afraid, a reality that when you build a huge stadium and you're the most indebted club in world football, you aren't just able to spend money that you don't have, even if PSR rules say that we can. And even if, we're getting enough revenue to be able to do it by the rules, we don't have the cash in the bank to do it. And that is why Levy and ENIC are looking for a 25% investor. They're looking for money to come in so that we can spend it on players. But at the moment, unfortunately, that can't happen. And I think the older generation are probably a little more patient to be able to wait for that. However, that doesn't mean I do not understand those of you who are a lot younger, who maybe have only been Spurs fans for the last 10 or 15 years. And during that time, Tottenham have been a top six club, but have been constantly bottom of that top six, the only top six club not to have won something. And I understand that, and it is difficult. And I think it'll be more of that generation who will be looking to protest. Although, like I said, there has definitely been more traction that I've seen on social media of kind of older Spurs fans who I'm aware of trying to get involved again as well. So let's see what happens with that protest. Let me know in the comments what you think. Should the protest be bigger? Should it be happening? Just getting back into the comments. Josh Kingnorth, thank you so much. Kingsnorth says, Ange just dumps out of 2 cups. What makes anyone think he can win the Europa League? Yeah, I think that's probably a fair point. Zach Taylor watching in the middle of a lecture. Cheers, mate. I appreciate that. I hope the lecture is more boring than this video. Designed to Win Liu says this. Where are you? Sorry. Oh, I've lost it. There we go. Think he will get to the end of the season, talking about Ange. Little point in changing now unless we continue as we have played the last few games. John Zygan says, just use Sonny as a super sub. Yeah, I kind of agree. Lou also says, depends what Sonny wants. He has to accept he can't play every week. And Matt Richardson says Sonny needs to be relieved of the captaincy so he can just play. So suggesting maybe the pressure of the captaincy is a little bit too much for Sonny. I think one of the difficulties with that is once you become captain, if you get the captaincy taken off you, then that will, I think, cause more damage to the player than it would to keep the captaincy. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. I really don't know. Chris J. Zinkuma says, at some point, Ange is not a problem. The problem is Levy. That man has destroyed Spurs a lot. Well, yeah, I think that plays into what I was just saying about the protests and stuff. I keep a kind of consistent feeling about Levy and ENIC, which is I'm not pro Levy or ENIC and I'm not them out. I have a feeling of be careful what you wish for. There are a lot of bad chairmen around, a lot of clubs who have nearly gone out of business and the like, or have been relegated and had to come back up. I just wish that Levy had the cash reserves or the club had the cash reserves to spend more on wages so that we were able to get the bigger and better players in. Okay, as I mentioned in the opening, there have been some reports that the list for the next manager options have been revealed. The first two, I think, as everybody kind of knows, or certainly the first one, Bournemouth's Andoni Iraola. The second one is Fulham's Marco Silva. Let me know how you feel in the comments about the potential Marco Silva coming to manage Spurs. He is doing a brilliant job at Fulham. They play lovely football and can be defensively pretty sound. I wonder if a lot of you will feel, and let me know in the comments, that because he had his chance at a club that are deemed to be a big club in Everton and it didn't go brilliantly for him there, although frankly, as to what's happened at Everton since he left, it just shows that that was a poison chalice, really. But I do wonder if because he had that chance at Everton, it didn't work, a lot of Spurs fans would think, no, that's not an exciting manager for Spurs. But potentially the most interesting name of all coming out today, and one that apparently Fabio Paratici is trying to push to Daniel Levy, is Simone Inzaghi, the Inter manager. Questions. Why should it be Inzaghi? He's won Serie A as recently as last season, and they're in the title race again this season. Also, he led Lazio to the 2018-2019 Italian Cup, which is only their 4th this century. So he knows how to pick up silverware with teams who don't pick up a lot of silverware. So that, I guess, could be a good reason for Inzaghi. He coaches teams that have formidable defenses as well as attacks. Last season, Inter had the most goals and scored and the fewest against in the entire league. And he's won 127 of his 192 games as boss of Inter, 2.17 points per game average. I mean, I guess my overall feeling on Simone Inzaghi is why would he come to Tottenham from Inter Milan? Unless he's like absolutely desperate to join a Premier League club, in which case it could be a good option. I don't see a lot of those big clubs changing managers this summer, and there could potentially be a space at Spurs. But he's doing well at Inter. I'm not really sure why he would. For me, still, Iraola seems like a kind of Pochettino-esque natural fit in that when Pochettino joined Spurs, he'd done brilliantly with an attacking, exciting young side at Southampton. And Spurs went and got him, and he did brilliantly at Spurs. And kind of the young team grew with Pochettino at Tottenham Hotspur, and that is potentially something that Iraola could do at the club. But I also like the idea of Marco Silva. I like his he's pretty stern, but seems to get them playing well. He seems like he's a man manager, but also when he comes out in the press and he talks, you can tell when he's livid and he's a bit stern. And I don't know, I feel like he might have the right personality for it. That's just my thought process. I don't know. Let me know how you feel in the comments. Guys, also at 76 likes now on this live show. Thank you so much for your support. Please do press that like button if you haven't already. Let's try and get up to 100 likes. The more likes we get, the more people get to see it. And if you're not already a subscriber to my channel, bringing you daily live shows, 12:30 every day. Although I will say I'm not going to be live with you tomorrow because I've got some other work to do. But I'll be back on Thursday and then 12:30 every weekday with live Tottenham Hotspur news, Premier League transfer news, and all the big football stories. Let's just go back into the comments again. Die Peaks, thank you for your comments. Says Son is too valuable commercially for Levy to sell him. Well, that I'm sure will have a big say in whether Son leaves the club. I've been saying for a while now, give Sonny a 10-year contract. Say that when you decide to hang up your boots, you can be an ambassador. Stay at the club as long as you can because, yeah, commercially, it's absolutely huge. For those of you who've ever been to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on a match day and been to the club shop, which is Europe's biggest club shop, the queue of people trying to buy merchandise is always out through the door. And so many of those are East Asians or South Korean fans. So undoubtedly, Tottenham have made huge sums of money from Son Heung-Min being at the club. And of course, that's probably why, as well as him being a young talent, Daniel Levy has brought in another young, exciting South Korean. Ben Kaufman says, thanks for your comment, Ben. Ben says, afternoon, everyone. I think whatever happens, I think we need a clean break in the summer. This 15 months of form is unacceptable, and it's possible this is the worst Spurs team of all time. Well, Ben, I think you must be a young fan then, because it's definitely not the worst Spurs team of all time. It's certainly the worst form we've shown at Spurs in the last 15, 20 years or so. But trust me, there was some absolute dross Spurs teams back in the 90s and before. We got relegated in 78, 79, I think. Or, I think it was 77, 78 or 78, 79. And believe it or not, that wasn't even that long before I was born. So I'm always quite appreciative of the fact that we are, talked about, even though a lot of the talk about Spurs is obviously taking the mickey out of us as a club. We weren't even talked about a lot in my childhood. Baguette and Blue says, I just watched that Jurgen Klopp documentary, End of the Storm. It took him 3 to 4 years to create a team that worked the way he wanted. I just don't think we can continue playing manager musical chairs. Thank you so much for your comment, Baguette and Blue and Blur. Sorry. I think that's a really excellent point. I really do. Klopp, when he joined Liverpool, had to deal with the players the likes of Nathaniel Klein and Adam Lallana. The goalkeeper, my God, the goalkeeper he had, the Belgian one, of course, and that was even before they got Karius in. And the club did stick with Jurgen Klopp. One thing I would say is they were never down in 14th. And I'm not sure their injury crisis was ever as bad as Tottenham's has been over the last year and a half or so. But it's true. And I agree with you about not playing manager musical chairs. And in some ways, I've said it before, do we have to give Levy some credit for sticking with this manager when it must have been so tempting, excuse me, to sack him because of the bad form that Postecoglou has brought to the club? But Levy is trying to stick with him. And I think one of the main reasons Levy is sticking with him, in fact, I think there are two reasons. One, the main one is because he's got so much abuse over the last few years for the timing of his sackings and sacking managers so early, all the way back to Martin Jol sacking him at half-time, to his sacking of Harry Redknapp when he came fourth in the league, to sacking Jose Mourinho the week before Cup final, to Conte, who actually I think really sacked himself or wanted to leave. I do think there is like an article to be seen or written or read about the Conte leaving, how Conte left the club, because people do think Levy sacked Conte, but I think at the very minimum it was kind of quid pro quo. Conte had his rant, he wanted to leave, he'd lost his gallbladder that year, two of his mates had died, and he wanted out, he wanted back to Italy, and in the end I think kind of Levy put him out of his misery a little bit. But yeah, let's see. Notius says Son is worth more than £10 million commercially. Yeah, but in terms of contract and what another club would pay, I'm not sure. Cage T says if 10 to 20 million quid is all we're going to get for Sonny, he should be worth more than that to the club, even if he plays just half of the games. Excellent point. Really excellent point, Cage T. I completely agree with you, actually. And like I said earlier, I think Sonny should only really leave if Sonny himself said, I want to leave. If he gets an opportunity at a club where he's like, I really want it, I want to go and play there, then I think that is the situation which we should let him leave. Martin Adams says, Son keep, play him less. Midfield needs better players who are letting the team down. talking about the current players, says no movement, no speed of passing. We know who they are. Cash in on them. Our younger players have been outstanding, e.g. Archie Gray. Yeah, I completely agree. For me, just no pace in the team, really. When you came up against that Aston Villa midfield and they were just running past us with pace and power at the weekend, we need more of that. When we had our best team under Pochettino, they were quick and they were powerful from every position through the middle of midfield. And they also were strong and hard to knock off the ball. And we need more of that. Ben Ransom says Jed Spence should be captain. He sets the standard on the pitch. Well, I think it's a bit early for Jed to be captain, but he is playing like a leader. He is one of the only players who is confident enough at the moment to try and do what I think the manager is telling him. Godfrey Drummond, thank you for your comments, says I think Thomas Frank's release clause is £9 million. Wait, I've lost your comment here. Sorry, it sometimes flicks to the bottom. Let me try and find that. Oh, anyway, I think he says, I think Thomas Frank's release clause is around £9 million. He's the current favourite if a change in the dugout occurs. Yeah, I like Frank, and I like that, when he was bringing Brentford up from the Championship, they played quite a beautiful style of play. And then when they came into the Premier League, he made it more direct because he knew they wouldn't stay up otherwise. However, I was pretty disappointed with Brentford the other day in terms of just how long and direct they were. And I didn't think that was the best audition, personally. I do like all the clips I see of Thomas Frank in the changing room at Brentford and all of his interviews and stuff. He is good, but I'm not quite sure that he plays the football that will impress the hierarchy or the fan base at the moment. B. Chris says, Barnaby, what is your thought on giving Son and Kulu rest time for the next two games? I have to say, I don't think it's likely they're going to get rest against Manchester United. I think they need some rest, but hopefully this week off, and I just hope that Ange has told them, go to the sun for 3 days or something, 4 days, go to Dubai for 4 days. Like a lot of those clubs had warm weather training sessions a week or two ago, and some of those players need proper rest, and hopefully that'll work for Kulusevski, whose form has dropped off but has been brilliant overall this season. Okay, I want to talk about an article that was on Sky Sports yesterday from their journalist Adam Bate, which was under the headline, Is Ange Postecoglou right to highlight injuries as the reason for the team's problems this season? He said this, even as Postecoglou launched an impassioned defense of his players, talking of an agenda-driven narrative centered around him and his team, there is the suspicion that it is he, rather than anyone outside the club, who is undermining their best efforts. The statistics still tell us that this Tottenham team, for all their struggles this season, play a little differently to everyone else. The principles of play that had Postecoglou Spurs 5 points clear at the top of the table early last season remain in place. For example, no team in the Premier League has won the ball higher up the pitch more times than Spurs, and no team allows so few passes per defensive action, and no team plays with more width than Spurs. By design, it is supposed to be intense and expansive. Postecoglou, he goes on, says, was aware that this approach would not be so effective for what was, remember, against Aston Villa and Liverpool, a one-off cup tie. And yet too often Spurs' positioning against Villa suggested they were still set up to press. Bodies in advance of the ball. No protection for the defence. I think these are all good points. The Australian coach appeared to acknowledge this with a sensible half-time switch, introducing Basuma in place of Moore. It gave his side more of a foothold in the game, and they went on to enjoy their best spell of the match thereafter. There had been hints, this is a good point, there had been hints of this more flexible approach in the recent win against Brentford, a game in which Tottenham dropped deeper, soaked up some pressure, and then came through it to claim the points. At Villa, the adjustment came too late. So this is really interesting to me, and he's made points that I agree with, which are... it seemed to me we actually needed to be a bit more pragmatic against Villa, but I think our big problem was we had tried to be pragmatic like we were against Brentford, against Liverpool, and we didn't get a kick. So after that Liverpool game, Ange Postecoglou came out and said, well, this has proven to us, hasn't it, that we're going to lose if we try and play pragmatically, so we might as well go for it. But as a result, in the very first minute of that game against Aston Villa, Porro caught ahead of the ball, and as a result, coming back the other way, they're in down the left, and obviously we know Kinski makes that mistake, but how many times in that first half they just ploughing through our central midfield and able to lay it off to the left because Porro was caught ahead of the ball. And that's where so many chances came from. And in fact, in the rest of the game, Kinski kind of saved it from being a lot worse, didn't it? Anyway, the journalist goes on to say, the idea persists that to make any compromise whatsoever for Postecoglou is to dilute the message, undermine all the hard work put in. Postecoglou says, my responsibility at this club is the group of players and team to get them playing in the manner I want them to. That will bring us success. But the alternative is surely damaging too, not just for Postecoglou, but to these young players, the ones who are, he says, his primary focus. Moore does not want to be hooked off at half time. Kinski and Gray are not relishing being so exposed. All good points. Really, we want to be in a situation, like I said, right at the top of this live show, where these young players are being blooded alongside the best players at the club, coming in to play minutes alongside those players who will help them, talk to them on the pitch, play them good balls in the right positions and make them chances. The article goes on to say, any team would suffer without their best players, but not this badly and not for so long without making the requisite adjustments. Besides, the difficulty for Postecoglou was that he had exacerbated the issue himself through his decisions and his approach. Bringing back Romero and Mickey van der Ven for the game against Chelsea was a surprise that brought little sympathy his way. The medical team may have signed off on it, but the move did not seem prudent even before both broke down. Is it misfortune? Perhaps not, given that Postecoglou's Tottenham have made more sprints than any other team in the Premier League this season. The evidence suggests that way of playing comes at a cost. The number of muscle injuries is unlikely to be coincidence. This is all really poignant stuff, I think, as far as I'm concerned. More sprints than any other team. So why are we so injured? That's why we're so injured. And now we're in like this vicious circle where, we don't think it works if we play defensively, and we're getting injured if we play attackingly, and it's not even really working then because we're not defensively strong enough because the players are so injured. And it feels like maybe the rest of this season is just going to be the revolving vicious circle of us struggling to get results and struggling to get players out on the pitch because of this all having happened for the last 18 months. He goes on to say supporters will still be divided because of the desire to play ambitious front foot football with young players feels like a mission statement that is worth buying into, which it is, but it is defeats, not an agenda that shape the narrative. Waiting for players to get fit might not be enough. Let me know in the comments, guys, how you feel about that. I think that is the best article that I've read so far that kind of really sums up the problems that Spurs have. And I kind of agree with so much of it. Guys, 120 of you have pressed that like button now. Thank you so much. If you haven't pressed the like button yet, please do. And please do subscribe to the channel for daily live videos about Tottenham, about Premier League transfers, about everything. I'll go into the comments quickly now. Can Pants says, is there a point where Ange in people will flip, or is it big Ange for life? I feel strongly that kind of a lot of people who were very supportive of Ange are starting to shudder a little bit, certainly over the last few weeks. Davo says Silva has more tactically than Ange, talking about Marco Silva, who I spoke about earlier as a possible Ange Postecoglou replacement. And Cantab says Silva is more experienced than Andoni as well. Andoni's lack of experience, it's an interesting one. Is that something you think counts against him in terms of the potential of being the next Spurs manager? Or might it breed a kind of young excitement like Pochettino had? He didn't have a lot of experience in terms of his Premier League experience anyway, did he? Simon Gibbs says, any new manager would need at least 10 games to steer us away from relegation. I don't think we're going to get a new manager in this season. I think if Ange was to go at some point this season, then unfortunately, I'm afraid to say, I think it would be an interim manager that came in again. The other reason, by the way, which I meant to say earlier, which of course is why I think the second reason why I think Ange is still in a job after the injuries is because of what has happened to Ruben Amorim at Manchester United and how that has shown that when it's going wrong, it's not quite as simple as just bringing in a new manager. Davo says, I'd be surprised if we move for a new coach this year. By the time the Euros are over, it will be too late in the year to bother unless someone becomes available or we're looking at relegation. Sean Pierce just says, Poch. Well, he's going to be American manager until the World Cup for sure, unfortunately. Ember Lab says, what about Terzic? Terzic is a name that has been spoken about, of course, because when he was offered a Turkey job maybe a month or two ago, he said, or his agent came out, his Mr. 15% came out and said, we are waiting for an offer from Tottenham Hotspur. So obviously Lange or Munn or maybe Paratici have spoken to his people. I don't know about Terzic. Quite a lot of pushback on him from the Spurs fan base saying they're not loving the kind of football that he plays. Mick Snee says, put Harry Redknapp in charge till the end of the season. I answered this yesterday, and I am going to talk about a Harry Redknapp quote about Spurs later in this episode, actually. But Redknapp, I'm afraid, since he last managed a top-level team, has been, he took QPR down, and he was king of the jungle in I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. So for him to manage Tottenham Hotspur after that would, I'm afraid, just be far too laughable. Let's see, what else have we got? Roy Park, thank you for your comment. It says, Ange is out of his depth. We need to sack him before the season is fully lost. It will also energize the team, get a new manager ready, and then make the switch. I just don't know if there are any new managers who will take a club over at this point. Certainly, there aren't any Premier League clubs, I think, who are going to let their manager go in the middle of the season. And really, the only way then you've got a chance of getting a manager to get out of their Premier League club is if they refuse to work for them. And then it becomes a whole mess with gardening leave and stuff like that. Pike, I don't know how I'm pronouncing this. Pick PYC. Anyway, thanks for your comment, mate. I spoke about Thomas Frank earlier. He said this: don't want Thomas Frank. When he was in the Championship, he was extremely arrogant and would belittle any manager who dared to play defensively, similar to Klopp. This nice guy image is a facade. Interesting. Danny M says, I find it hilarious that the one manager Levy does back happens to be the worst manager he has hired. That's funny. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Almighty Spurs says, if none of the other managers worked out since Pochettino, what makes us think the next one will? As exposed as we are right now, stick it out at least until the summer. Yeah, Davo says Decky Kulusevski should be captain, and El Dante says, I agree that Kulusevski should be captain. I do think Kulusevski might be the next captain of Spurs, actually, be that under a next manager or whenever, I don't know, Sonny leaves or what have you. Because let's face it, Romero doesn't play enough games and he's vice captain, and James Maddison, I don't think Maddison and Ange are big fans of each other at the moment. That's to say the least. Anyway, some team news coming from Tom Allnut, who was on the Tottenham Way podcast. He said that Ange hopes to have Destiny Udogie, James Maddison, and Guillermo Vicario back for the game against Manchester United on Sunday. Does that mean that they could actually start and they could actually play the game, or does that mean they're in training this week when he's already said he's going to give the players 2 or 3 days off? Listen, I don't know. Let me know in the comments how you feel, but I really feel like with these players, just give them maybe 2 full weeks of training before even getting them involved in a squad. I know we might lose some games, but the reality is, we cannot afford to have these players getting injured again. We just can't. Also, Matches Tell came out and said this after the game. He said, I know the quality of my teammates and the staff. I believe in them. I'm not scared about the future. Okay, so that's good news for any of you who might have wondered how Tell is feeling, having come in and lost 2 games in quick succession at Spurs. He did get that brilliant goal, didn't he? And showing his fox in the box qualities. Why did Ange start with Sonny at the number 9 and Tell out wide? I'm really not sure. As I mentioned, Harry Redknapp spoke on TalkSport yesterday. He said this about Ange Postecoglou. He said, wherever Ange seems to go, he doesn't take anyone with him. He comes in and works with the people he takes over. He looks a very lonely figure to me. I watch him on the touchline and I never see anybody come up to him and go, hey, Gaffer, Ange, what about this? You've got to have people around you that have got opinions. It's no good having people around you who go, oh, yes, Ange, or no, Ange. I do worry about that. I always took people with me who had strong opinions. Redknapp then said, it seems to me there is one common denominator there. The coaching staff seems to have been there with all the managers that have come and gone. I just wonder if he could come and do with a bit of help there. So that's an interesting angle from Harry Redknapp, isn't it? Not something we've really discussed before. I kind of agree. I think it's important not to have yes men there. Obviously, Ryan Mason is one of the assistants. But I believe it's Matty Wells, isn't it, who's closer to him as the assistant this season. He was brought in. I don't know. Yeah, obviously Harry always had Kevin Bond, didn't he, as his assistant, as well as the snarling Scotsman who had that fight with Gattuso, Joe Jordan. Yeah, I agree in that you don't want yes men. You do need people around you, but it's always worked for Ange so far. I guess the argument to that would be Ange has never managed at the elite level before, and maybe things are different. But let me know in the comments what you think. Dr. Johnny D7 says, why would the locals be yes men to Ange? If anything, bringing in the crew would be. I guess Harry's just saying that the people that he always worked with had very strong opinions. And Good Life says, time to get rid of Ryan Mason. Stephen Flynn says, get behind players and manager. I'm old enough to remember how close Man United came to sacking Alex Ferguson. He started off as bad as Big Ange. Really good point, Stephen Flynn. Thank you for your comment. That's absolutely true. And I have to say, I watched the Manchester United, the Alex Ferguson documentary on BBC iPlayer. And if you haven't watched it, do watch it, because it really does show how poor Man United were in the first year and a half, 2 years under Alex Ferguson, and how just some important signings and some change in confidence really did change that for him. Now, I'm not suggesting that Spurs are going to go and win the league straight away if they stick with Ange Postecoglou, but maybe there is something in it. Ali Minson in the comments says, don't you think it's fishy that we haven't seen Romero since he spoke out against Levy the other week? It was a bit longer than the other week, wasn't it? But we haven't seen Romero at all. I think there's something fishy about both those centre-backs, to be honest. I really did. Matthew Nicholas in capital says Alex Ferguson did not start as bad as Ange. Well, Alex Ferguson did not start as well as Ange at the beginning of his first season. He didn't come fifth, and he didn't, he wasn't top of the league by 5 points after 10 games. But he also did. He was as low as Ange Postecoglou is now in the first division when he started at Manchester United. I'm afraid, Matthew, you're wrong there, and I would suggest going to watch that documentary because you'll see it. There was so much pressure on him. A lot of the Man United fans wanted him properly gone, and they stuck with him. There's also, just some more news, there was also an interview with our ex-reserve goalkeeper Michel Vorm this week. He said the following: Spurs won't get relegated. Once the fit players return, they'll be better. Spurs have a very good squad. The team is struggling at the minute, especially at home. You can see the players feel the pressure when they're on the pitch. The effort and commitment is there, but they just seem incapable of making the right decisions on the pitch. The form will turn, but at the minute they need strong characters to push the team on. The injury list hasn't been kind. For instance, they've had to use 4 goalkeepers this season. That's kind of unheard of, guys. We need to remember that. But even so, the team should be beating teams like Leicester at home. There's no disputing this. I don't think replacing Postecoglou would change anything. It's just important to get all the top players back as soon as possible and then see how things go. Vorm also spoke about how Tottenham's ultimate aim is to win trophies. However, he says that they have a lack of a winning culture. He added, it's difficult because Spurs haven't won anything in such a long time. And it's so competitive to win a trophy with all the top teams spending big money and always pushing. So there isn't a winning culture at Spurs. That's the reality because they haven't got a trophy under their belt in recent years. But during my time at Spurs, we had a great group of players. The players were tight and communicated well all the time. You could see this on the pitch. We were close to winning trophies. We won many games and had very good players. The aim is to get back to this. The first task is putting yourself in a position to regularly challenge for honours. So now it's important for Spurs to get a group of players who are all capable and hungry to progress in the right direction. Well, I have to say I agree with Michel Vorm, but you can't get a winning mentality until you start to win. And we're not winning at the moment. But I am hopeful, once again, if we can just turn the tides, get the players back, turn the tides. Ember Lab says this: Ange sets up his training exactly how he wants to play. Our players are playing double the games. This is his fault. Well, actually, he says that we haven't been training at all, really. We've just been recovering for the last few months because we've been playing so many games. So, as I mentioned yesterday, part of me is wondering whether actually we're slightly undertrained. Because we're trying to do it so hard on the pitch, and maybe they're just not training enough during the weeks. But look, who knows? I can't claim to know a lot about training or medical stuff, so I really can't. Just one annoying report, not really a report, but a comment from Joe Cole, who said Harry Kane would suit Arsenal down to the ground. I could see the logic with Harry Kane joining Arsenal, he told Paddy Power. He's gone to Germany and he's carried on where he left off. The man just oozes goals. For Arsenal as a footballer, he'd be the perfect last piece in the jigsaw. He suits them down to the ground. And thank God, then at the end, Joe Cole said this. I can't see it, however. There's such a wrench between the two clubs. I think it would be too much for Harry. Sol Campbell joining Arsenal from Spurs was a bit different to this. But from a football perspective, it makes a lot of sense because he's perfect for their style of football. Well, yeah, exactly. As Kanteb says in the comment, Kane would suit any club. There is no way he would go to Arsenal. It would never, ever happen. We don't even need to worry about it. And it really pisses me off when ex-footballers like Paul Merson this week and Joe Cole, I guess they have to answer questions that are put to them, but it's just not realistic. It's never going to happen. They can all go and F themselves. Okay, guys, 150 nearly of you have liked this video already. Please do. If you haven't pressed the like button, please do press the like button now. Let's get up to 150. The more likes we get, the more people get to see this. Also, over 400 people watching concurrently. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do press that subscribe button. I'm nearly at 15,000 subscribers, and I bring you daily Premier League transfer news, always starting with my beloved Spurs and all of the Tottenham news as well. I will now, before the end of the episode, bring you the other transfer news from around the country. Man United ready to submit a bid of £33 million for Barca's 21-year-old left-back Alejandro Balde. In the summer, that seems unlikely. They've just brought in Patrick Dorgu, snaring him from ahead of Tottenham Hotspur. Also, United want Athletic Bilbao sporting director Mikel Gonzalez to replace Dan Ashworth. Newcastle is set to beat Barcelona and Real Madrid to free transfer signing of Spanish under-19 winger Antonio Cordero. Man United and Chelsea are interested in Ipswich's Liam Delap. He's also on Tottenham's list. And also Chelsea are interested in Spanish under-21 Bournemouth player Dean Howson, who's also on Tottenham's list. Guys, thank you so much for watching this live episode. I really appreciate it. Like I said, please do press the like button. Please do press subscribe. Getting close to 15,000 subscribers. Let's get there. I'm here every weekday with daily Premier League transfer news, all the Tottenham news starting it off. And always live now, 12:30 every weekday. So keep an eye out for my 12:30 shows every weekday this week, except tomorrow. I won't be doing one tomorrow, but hopefully that'll allow for lots of news and a longer bumper edition on Thursday as we start winding down or winding up even towards the game Tottenham Hotspur against Manchester United on Sunday afternoon. We need a big win. We need some of those players back, and we need to start playing Ange ball on the front foot and showing this fan base and showing everybody that we can have a good end to this season. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.